This is Alex.
And this is Nadine.
And for September, we're taking you on a tour of the architectural history of the Lakeshore grounds.
Let's build some memories. Just in the corner of Kipling and Lakeshore Boulevard stands Student Welcome and Resource Center, designed in 2016 by Moriyama and Toshima. Its double-height entrance is wrapped in glass and is supposed to present openness, transparency, and accessibility.
The forecourt of the Welcome Center is designed to look unfinished. The open trellis structure acts as a permeable enclosure to invite you into the building. In addition to the gardens in the forecourt, the Welcome Center also hosts a green roof on the second half of the open space. Originally constructed in the 1950s as a car dealership, the annex building was renovated in 2010 by Gow Hastings Architects. The large windows were covered with transparent aluminum to soften light coming into the classrooms and make space for a cascading green wall.
Humber Fashion Institute was built in 1890 as John Sheen's Hotel. It was known as Almond Hotel a little bit later. It had a hand in its own prohibition smuggling ring, on top of being a bar, a nightclub, and a hotel.
L Building, completed in 2011, is in stark contrast to the 19th century brick buildings around it. It does pose an interesting question about heritage conservation versus modernization and utility.
Thanks for watching. Next week, join us when we go from the 21st century architecture
to the 19th century.
The red brick buildings behind me are dated to Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital, which operated for 89 years and held many different names. Instead of following a monolithic institutionalized design, it actually follows what's called a cottage plan.
The idea behind the cottage plan was to provide smaller, more home-like structures for patients. This hospital was designed by architect Kevis Tully. Much of the work on the site was done by unpaid patient labor for the construction, maintenance, and upkeep of the buildings.
1989, just 10 years after the Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital closed, Humber College came in and took over the lease from the province of Ontario for 99 years. Taylor and Hazel were the first architects to start the renovations in 1991 to 2010.
Humber's G building was the front entryway to the Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital. It stood as the administrative building and even housed some staff in the earlier years. What we don't see today is a decorative tower that was taken down in 1954 for structural safety.
To decorate this large sandstone archway, the hospital used stained glass windows and the gardens planted right below. They also planted the gardens in a roundabout right across. This was the last building to be renovated by the Humber College in 2016.
One of the most recent additions to Humber's Lakeshore campus is G Commons. This glass and steel structure was added onto the old administration building to transform it into a presentation and multi-purpose modern space.
Another Humber addition are these awnings over the entryways facing the courtyard. They're actually meant to resemble the wooden verandas that stood during the hospital times just on the opposite side of the buildings.
When the Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital opened in 1890, they were already facing issues with overcrowding. Over the next several years, each cottage was given an addition and several buildings were combined into one structure. You can tell the difference by looking around the base for the sandstone and in patterns in the brick.
Campus famously has a set of tunnels that date back all the way to Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital. Now, tunnels is a bit of a stretch. As you can see, where sandstone ends and the brick begins, that's the tops of the tunnels with the windows that have been boarded up.
Next week on Tidbit 2.
We're going to show you some of the other buildings that Lakeshore Grounds has to offer. The gatehouse was built in 1891, designed by the same architect that designed the Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital cottages, Kevis Tully. The greenhouse used to stand here for many years. Now it's a meditation garden and a labyrinth.
The picnic shelter is one of the oldest structures on the Lakeshore grounds. It dates to 1893 and was constructed by the Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital as a waterfront gazebo overlooking the original shoreline that stood just beyond it.
The powerhouse behind me was built in 1938 as a coal power plant in order to provide electricity for Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital. Today, it is owned by the City of Toronto and has just recently completed extensive renovations.
Originally designed by architect Francis R. Heath, the Assembly Hall was constructed in 1898 using unpaid patient labor from the Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital. The building was host to multi-denominational religious services as well as other activities for patients from the hospital.
With a push from the community, the Assembly Hall was finally renovated in 2001 by Tipo Architects. It is now operated by the City of Toronto and it is very much a cultural hub. Thanks for watching. Tune in next week
while we explore the outskirts of the Lakeshore grounds. This week on Tidbit Tours, we'll be talking about different buildings outside the Lakeshore grounds proper from way outside the Lakeshore grounds. Stay tuned to the end for a special announcement for October's theme. The waterfront trail in Marie Curtis Park cuts through the old shooting range of the Small Arms Factory. Here, the manufactured rifles and submachine guns were test-fired for accuracy and functionality. The large wooden barriers dampen the sound of gunfire and can still be seen in the park today. Long Branch's exclusive cottage resort began in 1883 when 64 acres of land were purchased from the Eastwood family to become Long Branch Park. Several private homes in Long Branch today are original cottages and have heritage status. Lenford Park was the center of the Long Branch cottage community, including the Long Branch Hotel. Opened in 1887, the building featured distinct Japanese-style designs. It stood until February of 1958 when a fire completely destroyed the rest of the building. The Campbell Soup Company opened in New Toronto in 1931, providing jobs and the scent of cooking soup to the community for 87 years. The company recently announced the closure of its New Toronto factory in January of 2018. Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company opened its New Toronto branch in 1917, then in a highly active industrial area. The factory originally stood on 23 acres on the north side of Lakeshore Boulevard between 9th Street and 13th Street. The building hosted multiple facilities for their employees, but the plant did close in 1987 after a financial crisis, with the property then passing to residential developer Daniels Group to become the apartment buildings and a townhouse condominium we see today.